Welcome to our session, getting started with the Maps SDK for Android, with my colleague Emily here, who is a developer relations specialist. Um, Before we do get started with the session, I just wanted to go through a couple logistics for this session. First of all, it is being recorded, and all the recordings will be available to all registrants after the event. So if you go to the build Zoom lobby or the Zoom console where you've been accessing all the sessions, the recordings will be available there after the event. So you can go to that same place and go get the recordings. There's 60 sessions this week. That's a lot of sessions. So I know it's most likely impossible to attend all of them. So if you miss one, head there after the event. You can go grab a recording, or if you want to just be reminded of something that was talked about like today in this session, go grab the recording. Captions are also available in multiple languages. That image on the right of this slide here, the large one, you can see the captions button, which should be in your Zoom bar. You could click that and check out what's available. The next thing is you may have questions. Please submit them through the Zoom Q&A feature. Again, there's an image on the bottom right where you can see that Q&A button, which should be in your Zoom bar. Click that and send your question. I'll be monitoring the Q&A this entire session. We may be answering some right there in the Q&A box. We'll ideally get to some live as well. But that's the best place to ask a question. We do have the chat. Some of you have already engaged in the chat. If you ask a question there, we may see it and get to it, but the Q&A box is what I'm monitoring regularly and looking at first for questions. And then finally, like I said, we do have 60 sessions this week, and it's hard to believe, but build isn't even halfway over yet. So if you want to know other sessions that we have, head to mapbox.com/build or go to that build Zoom console where you've probably already been, and all of the sessions are listed there by day. Okay, so with that, I want to pass it off to Emily, who's going to give us a demo of getting started with the Maps SDK for Android.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg. Appreciate you emceeing. Hi, everyone. Like Greg said, my name's Emily. I'm a developer relations specialist here at Mapbox. I do a ton of different things between updating our tutorials to match new and upcoming information, as well as some how-to videos. And I actually respond to a lot of your guys' feedback. So thank you for all your submissions. It really helps improve our documentation. But yeah, so let's get started. For today's agenda, we're going to be walking through Mapbox tokens and configure your credentials. We're also going to showcase how to actually add the Mapbox dependencies to your project. We're also going to go through some different code snippets of how to add a map to your application, adjust the map style and viewport, and as well as things of like adding markers at locations, parsing through GeoJSON data to add markers to your application, and then doing a reset the map viewport button by using fly to animations. And then we'll wrap up at the end with some Q&A and some potential next step suggestions to figure out things that you can do after the presentation. If you want to follow along while we're going through these code examples, you'll just need Android Studio, a Mapbox account, a PNG to use for a custom marker, and then the Getting Started with Mapbox SDK for Android tutorial, which you can actually access with the QR code here or type out the link as you see on the screen. But yeah, so again, if you want to follow along, you're more than welcome. But yeah, so also too, this is going to be based in Jetpack Compose. So all the code examples I'll be going through will be using that. A lot of our tutorials and code snippets do have views examples, but later in the presentation, I will be manually typing some stuff out. So just as a heads up. All right, so let's get started. We'll start with adding your Mapbox token. So in order to use Mapbox, you need Mapbox tokens. And to do this, we'll add them to add one to our project by creating an XML resource file, grabbing a code snippet from our documentation, and then we're gonna add that token to the resource file. And so actually what I'll do is I'll start by opening up Android Studio here. Um, in here, we're going to want to go to app res, and then we're going to go into the values folder and create a new resource file here. You can name this whatever you want. I recommend naming it something like Mapbox access token, just so it's easy to remember what the file is for. But here we're going to store the token in this file so our project can reference it. Um, to grab the code snippet to set up that file, you're going to want to go to this tutorial I mentioned before. And we're going to scroll down to part one, configure credentials, step one. And you'll see this code snippet right here. Um, I'll also note too, I'd recommend being logged into documentation. You can see in the top right corner of the screen here, my profile pictures here. If you don't see a profile picture, you'll see like the login sign up buttons. And the nice thing about doing that is we auto inject your access token to code snippets. So you don't have to go and manually grab it yourself. You can actually see right here, it's like PK and then a value. So that's my access token. But yeah, so we're going to copy that over and paste that in here. And again, just double checking that the token pasted. If you see your Mapbox access token, it didn't grab the token, so just double check that information. But yeah, so we'll have our token set up there. Now that we have our token, we can go in and add Mapbox dependencies to actually start accessing Mapbox services. And so in order to do this, we're going to want to make adjustments to our settings Gradle file and then our build module file, our build Gradle file, specifically the module level one, and I'll show you how to do that. So if we go back to our tutorial here, we're going to scroll down to part two, add the dependency. And we're going to start by adding a reference to our Mapbox Maven repository. So here you're just going to want to copy the code, make sure it's set to Kotlin and not Groovy because I think it's Groovy by default. And then we're going to swing back over here. Once you have that code snippet copied, you're going to want to go to Gradle scripts, and then you're going to want to go to your settings.gradle.kts file. And then we're going to take this and paste under Maven Central a reference to our Mapbox repository. I'll note, make sure you're pasting it in the dependency resolution management section and not plugin management, otherwise you're going to run into problems. But all right, now that that's all set, next we're going to double check some settings to make sure your project will be compatible with Mapbox. So the first thing is you're going to want to make sure your min SDK is at least 21. I think mine is set to 24. So let's go to our build Gradle KTS file here, specifically the module version. And right here we can check and see that it's 24. Since we're also using Compose, let's scroll down to build features and double check that this is also set to true so we can access Compose features. And now that those settings are all set, we're going to actually start adding the dependencies. So here, this dependency is going to give you access to Mapbox services. So let's copy this one here and we're going to go place it in our dependency section. This gives us again like general Mapbox features, but we're also going to need a Compose version as well. So we're going to go here and copy this because we have additional functionality for combos specifically. So you'll need a reference to both these libraries. But all right, so once that's all set, you're gonna want to sync your Gradle files. Make sure you do this because again, sometimes if you don't do that, you might run into issues. You can either sync it by the prompt here, or if you don't get that prompt, you can go to File, Sync Project with Gradle files, and that'll run. But yeah, all right, so now that we're all set with that, let's go to the next slide. Now we're going to actually start going in and adding some code. So we'll start by adding code to render a map in your application. And in order to do that, we're going to copy the code from the tutorial, run the emulator, and then I'm going to cover some general troubleshooting tips just in case you're experiencing problems. So yeah, let's go back to the tutorial here. I'll note, make sure your toggle here is set to Jetpack Compose so the code snippet's correct. Copy this and then go back to your Android Studio project. And under Kotlin Java, you're going to open the first folder and then open up your main activity file. Since this is a new project, I'm just going to copy and paste the whole thing and make sure you update your package directive to match your project name, if it'll let me do that. There we go. All right. And so now that this is pasted, you can see that we're creating a reference to a Mapbox map, setting up some camera options to adjust the viewport on the map for when it loads. We have a modifier here that's going to make it fill the entire screen, but let's run this and see it in action. Give that a second to load. But yeah, the nice thing too, and I'll cover this more later, we can make some adjustments so the map can change where it's spawning in. but we'll get this to load initially. Oh, hold on, let me turn that on. All right, there we go. All right, sweet. So here we go. We have a map using Mapbox. You can interact with the globe, move it around, zoom in. But yeah, so that's the basic implementation of how to get started of like going through the install guide. And now that we have a map up and running in our application, we're going to go in and add some additional features. Oh, sorry, I forgot to cover troubleshooting tips. So, like I mentioned before, make sure your package directive matches the file. So because sometimes you'll run into problems there if you're copying and pasting the code from our tutorial. Um, I always recommend rerunning the emulator too if you're running into problems, making sure you've sunk your Gradle files, and then lastly, just for that token, like I mentioned before, make sure it doesn't say your Mapbox access token and you're using a current up-to-date valid token. Right. So now let's go into changing the viewport. So as I mentioned before, we have a bunch of different camera options, so you can change where your map spawns in or where your camera spawns in over your map. We have zoom here, which just how far in you're zooming. If I made like an adjustment, let's say 12, it'll zoom in a lot further. You can also change where in the map you're spawning in. So right now we're over the center of the United States. And then for pitch and bearing, if we made adjustments to these, this just changes the angle of the map that you're viewing. So you can make adjustments to those. Now, the one downside is as I'm going in and manually making these changes, that's, really time consuming because I'm refreshing the emulator constantly. We actually offer a really helpful tool called Location Helper. You can access the QR code here or copy the URL. And this Location Helper allows you to kind of manually pick a view and then copy over the information as opposed to doing it in code. And to show you guys that in action, let's go to the location helper here. So instead of like I was before manually changing all those values, you can go in and kind of like make the adjustments and see like, okay, well, how do I want this to be angled? Kind of where do I want my view to be in the world? How zoomed in and zoomed out do I want it to be? So let's pick Providence, Rhode Island. And we're gonna go in and copy these settings over to our project so you can kind of see it in action. So, oh, and the nice thing too is we have different versions based on like what platform you are. So I'm having it selecting Android here. So it'll set up the code properly for my implementation. But yeah, all right, so let's copy the center point and I'm gonna replace this here. And then we're gonna grab so we have the zoom and bearing. I'm gonna type zoom manually, but so we'll do 8.5 and then our bearing here. And then lastly, we'll grab our pitch, which is 61. Oh, sorry. Um, here. And so now if I were to refresh the emulator, you'll see the view that we're seeing in our emulator now matches the one that's over in Location Helper. So you can see like Women and Infants Hospital, like you can see it on here. You can see like the train station, Route 44. So it just really helps you instead of like going in and manually changing all the settings, you can go in and make these adjustments and then figure out what you want before changing it. All right, sweet. Now that we've covered Location Helper, let's go into changing the look of the map itself for things like lighting presets, and coloring themes. So in order to do that, another tool that we have is our Mapbox Standard Playground. Very similar to Location Helper, instead of going in and manually changing everything, you can use our Standard Playground to figure out what's the kind of look you want and then go in and change the code. So again, here's the QR code and the link. But yeah, let's go switch over to that and I'll showcase that live. So here is our Mapbox Standard Playground. And as you can see on the left side here, we have a bunch of different configuration options, starting with lighting and themes. So over here, you can change like what the lighting and theme sets are. So like if say for instance, I want it to like make it look like it's dawn, it'll change the lighting accordingly. If I want it to be nighttime, it'll darken the lighting. And this is really nice because like you can kind of get a feel for what you're looking for without having to do it manually first. We also have different color themes of like you could do faded, you could do monochrome. If you had a lookup table that you created, we have some like default ones here, but you could go in and add a lookup table and see how that looks. But for this presentation, let's do like dawn with like a faded look. On the right side too, you have a bunch of code here that you can pull from. Again, depending on like if you're using web, if you're using iOS, and if you're using Android. Since I have a different like viewport setup, I'm just gonna copy this section here. But oh whoops, I just realized I'm using the wrong one. But yeah, actually, copy it from this side. But yeah, so we can copy this code over here and then paste it into our project and see our theme changes. So underneath the map viewport state, we can paste this right here. And let that, it automatically imported the files, but just make sure you're importing the right libraries. And so we'll get this up and running. And now you can see we have the different colors just like we do in the standard playground here. But and then also too, like as you can see with the code here, if I were to go off of light preset, we have all the different versions like we showed in Mapbox standard. So this is really helpful if you again want to change some of the default templating. Um, Mapbox standards is also really good too if like you're getting up and started and you don't know like what you want your like themes to look like and your different colors to look like. So it kind of gives you like a default vector map to just get up and running and see what's going on. You can eventually do things like adding your own custom style and adding a lot of like minute changes. But again, if you're getting up and running using standards, fantastic because it has everything built in for you. All right, now that we've gone in and access standard, changed the map lighting, and changed the colors, let's go in and add a marker to our map. So we have a bunch of different types of markers that you can utilize, but I'm going to just cover two for this session. So we have circle annotations, which are great if you just want to highlight a single point of interest really quick and fast. It literally just adds a colored circle to wherever you're pointing on the map. And then if you want to do like add your own custom image, something like a point annotation is really helpful because you, as you can see on the right here, you can change what the image looks like. So let's start with a circle annotation. In order to add that to your application, we're just going to need to declare the circle annotation and give it a location, and then we'll change the color and the radius. All right, so let's go back to Android Studio here. And after the declaration of the map, I'm going to add a set of brackets and we'll go in and we'll start adding our circle annotation. So with the circle annotation, we're going to want to go in and give it a point. So if let's do point gets, and then we're going to want to do it kind of like we did up here, where it's like point from long lat. I'm actually going to give it the exact point of our viewport or the exact location of our viewport so we know for a fact where the marker is on screen. That's another thing. Make sure wherever like location you're adding as you're walking through with this, you can actually see it in the viewport. You just don't pick a random location because we haven't done like fly to animations to make sure you're viewing it yet. And now that that's all set, let's refresh our emulator here, and you should see a big black dot right in the middle of your screen. Um, if you want to change the color, for example, you could go in and do color. Let's make it blue. I'll need to import the color library here. And then we can also change the radius. If we did color circle radius, let's give it like, let's say 10. All right, and if we refresh the screen, so we'll see that dot again, but now it should be a little bit bigger and it should be blue. All right, sweet. So that's how you can do circle annotations. Again, you can't do a ton of customization with it, but it's really great to just quickly get up and started and highlight your point of interests on your map. All right, next let's move to custom markers. So using a point annotation, we're going to add an image, or we're going to add a marker on the screen with a custom image. We're going to need to add the image to our project, create a reference to the image in code, and then create the actual point annotation itself. And so in order to do that, first we're going to, actually, sorry, we should add the image itself. So I have two folders open here. This is the image that I want to use, and I have our project opened up in the Finder window. So in your project, in order to add images, you're going to need to go to App, Source, Res, and Drawable, and we're just going to drag this image in here. And so now if I switch back to Android Studio, we'll be able to see that the marker has been added to our project. So we'll be able to reference it in code now. And in order to do that reference, we're going to want to do, let's make a new declaration of like a variable named marker. And then we're going to use remember icon image. and then we're going to access that the name of the file in our project, so red marker. Let's add this, import this library here. Oh, did I name this wrong? Oh, I forgot an M. If I would spell it correctly, that'd help. So, well, now I want to import this library. And so now what's going to happen is we'll grab a reference to our file in the project, so then we can assign that to our point annotation. The nice thing with point annotations is they're built really similarly to circle annotations. So I'm actually just going to rename this. Um, and the constructors are built the same. So I can just import this and this will be all set. So let's do composable. And again, we're gonna now replace that circle with our point annotation. And then we just need to give the point annotation a reference to that marker image we just made. And we'll do marker. All right, and so now if we refresh our screen, we'll now see a marker appear in the middle instead of our blue dot. All right. And now that we've added our custom marker, a question that you might have is, well, you're manually plotting points by just giving a longitude and a latitude. I have a bunch of data that I need to utilize and add to a map. Do you recommend, how to do that? And so we use, or we work really well with GeoJSON files. So if you have like a ton of data, you can put it in a GeoJSON file and then reference it for your project. If you're going super large scale, we have other services too, like Mapbox tiling services, which some of the other talks have talked about. But say for instance, you have dozens or hundreds of points, a GeoJSON file would be really helpful. Um, and if you don't have a GeoJSON file already prepared, you can use our tool geojson.io to make one of those files, which I'll actually walk through and do with you. Again, here's the QR code or the URL if you want to type that out yourself. But let's go on to geojson.io and we'll make a file to use. So, one of the cool things about Providence is there's a lot of cool coffee shops. I've been all over Providence, had a lot of fun drinks as time's gone on. So let's pretend we're making a coffee app to showcase all these cool places. And so if I wanted to make this application, I could go in and if I had like a list of addresses that I needed to utilize, I could go in and search for these addresses and then you can place markers wherever you need to save their coordinates. This first place is a really nice coffee shop called Bolt Coffee or Bolt Cafe. They've got a fun little working space that you can go check out. Actually, on a work trip, one of my coworkers and I were there. So highly recommended if you're ever in the area. And the nice thing is you can go in and edit this GeoJSON file on the right side here. And so now that I have the coordinates for Bolt Cafe, I can actually go in and write like, okay, the name of the coffee shop is Bolt Cafe. And then this will appear later on in our project. For the next location, I've got another cool spot called Plant City. They're more than just a coffee shop, but they have a killer lavender latte. So they're over here. They're on the water too, which is a really nice area. But so we can add that location and then again do name and do Plant City. As you're doing these changes too, make sure you're doing it correctly in the brackets, otherwise you'll have problems. But and then our last place, I found these guys by accident walking around downtown one time. Um, it was White Electric Coffee. So they have some really nice beans. I bought like a set of beans and brought them home and made some coffee and it was nice because I think they work like with a local roaster. But yeah, so again we'll do name and then we'll do White Electric Coffee. All right, and so now that we have this GeoJSON file all built out, you can see these 3 points on the map here. I'm gonna copy this and then we're gonna add it to our project. So if I'm going back to Android Studio, the way that you add GeoJSON to your project is you grab your GeoJSON file, create an assets folder, and either create the file in your project or bring over the file into your assets file. You're then going to access the GeoJSON data in code, and then we'll spawn a marker per data point. So to do that, I'll show you how to do that here. To create the assets folder, first you're gonna want to do file, new folder, and then assets folder. Make sure you're following this exact method and not just creating a folder named assets, because Android Studio will know how to link everything properly if you do it this way. And then so once we have this in there, I can then go into my assets folder and then create a new file. Let's name this coffeeshops.geojson. And now I can paste my GeoJSON code in here in order to reference it in code. Give this a quick look through too to just make sure there's no like red anywhere. If like say for instance like you messed up where like a comma is supposed to be, it'll pop up, which is nice. But all right, now that we have this in our project, we can now reference it. So there's gonna be a couple of sections of code that you'll need to in order to access the file. These I'm gonna copy over because they're a little bit larger, but so first above your map declaration, we're gonna want to post or paste two different things. First, you're gonna want to create a feature collection to store all of your data. So once we've gone into the file and grabbed the data, we can keep each of the like marker locations in a feature collection to iterate through when we're creating the markers. And then we're also going to do a launched effect in order to open the file and then grab the GeoJSON from it. So you can see here we're accessing our assets file, our assets folder, and then opening the specifically named file. And then we'll be able to access our GeoJSON, parse the JSON, and then add it to that feature collection. So it'll be easy for us to go through and grab each of those features. Now that that's done, in this section down here, I'm going to delete the point annotation for now. And I'm going to copy over some code that's going to iterate through our feature collection. So let's do that. All right, so this code here is going to iterate through our feature collection. For each feature, each coffee shop will say, we're going to grab the geometry, which allows us to access their longitude and latitude, and then assign that to a point. And then we're going to give that point to a point annotation, which will then make it spawn on screen. Just like before, we're still passing through our marker icon to icon image, so that'll render the icon that we want. And then we'll come back to this code in the next step, so I'm gonna actually get rid of that for now. But this will allow you to spawn a point at each of the coffee shops. So let us, sorry, 1 second. Um, sorry, hold on 1 second. There we go. If we move this down, there we go. All right, refresh our emulator. We should now see our 3 points appear in our emulator at each of those coffee shops that we mentioned. All right, so now that we've gone through and added all those points, I'm gonna just cover some quick troubleshooting tips in case you didn't get exactly on screen like what I have. So make sure that your data is added correctly. Like I mentioned before, go into your file. If you see any red, make sure to tweak that. Like say for instance, if you accidentally did something outside of properties when you meant to do it inside of those brackets. Make sure again you're importing your asset folder correctly and not just creating any folder. And then make sure it's GeoJSON lowercase, not uppercase for when you're creating the file. And then lastly, just make sure your file matches or your file names match. Typos can sometimes catch you on that kind of stuff. But yeah, so let's move next to adding interactions. So that code that I deleted from before, I'm going to add that back in. Oh, whoops. Actually, we'll just do this. But so I'll kind of walk you through what's going on here. So for each of the coffee shops, we're going into the feature and then going into the properties to grab the name that we created before in GeoJSON IO. And then it's going to go through and grab the coffee shop name for each of our features or each of our markers. And then down here, we can add an interaction or adjust the interaction state. So when you're clicking on the marker, something happens. Down here, we'll actually go through and make a toast for each of those and pass it in that coffee shop name. So when you click on them, a toast will pop up. And I'll actually go over on the right side here and do that. So if I click on this, you can see it says Wet Electric Coffee down here, Bolt Cafe, and then last but not least, Plant City. It's really nice adding interactions because obviously if you have like a bunch of data, you're not necessarily going to know what each of your points do. Right now we're just doing toast for the sake of time, but if say for instance you wanted to add additional UI like a bottom modal sheet, those are really helpful to make things look nice and clean. But yeah, so that's adding interactions. Next, we're going to go to fly to animations. So something that you might notice if, say, for instance, like let's say we had a bunch of data points on screen, and you like zoomed in a ton, and then we're moving over. It's easy to kind of get lost with how large the globe is. Um, so we can do something called fly to animations to allow us to more easily like reorient our viewport. So if someone were to get lost in the map, they can go back to wherever the data is. So let's go through and showcase how to do that. So, in order to do that, you're going to need to create a button on screen. And then we're going to give it the functionality of like determining where the center of the map is. And then actually, once we click that button, it'll allow us to fly to whatever the location is. So I'm going to copy that from over here. There's a lot of different codes. So I'm going to just copy and paste a separate file that I have. And then I'm going to walk you through everything. But yes, let's do that. All right. So. Going through our new code here, we have a bunch of different changes we're going to walk through. So first, in our previous version of the code, when we declared the map, we had set a bunch of default values in the actual constructor of the map itself. When you're doing fly twos, you're going to want to make a separate declaration so it's easier to access the code. Otherwise, once the map's created, the information's out of scope and you can't use it anymore. Oh, sorry, I gotta update my package directive. Um, Change to that. All right. And then so yeah, so make sure you're adding like it says up here, map viewport state, and adding that code to or adding those default variables to to its own thing. Um, Next, we're also doing some scaffolding. So this is really good for like rearranging the UI and making it on like a clean spot on your screen as opposed to like if you do just a regular floating action button, it's going to be like up in the corner. So this will help with like making it a little more centered. Um, Next, we're going to go in here. We have the actual floating button itself. So on click, we're grabbing a center coordinate that we've determined. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, we have a private companion object, which grabs the longitude and latitude of the center of providence. And we're assigning that to a new like camera options. So we'll be able to like tell the map where we want it to go. And then here we're storing a default value of 11, which allows us to be zoomed out enough to see all of our marker points. Next, we have animation options here. So this just allows us to determine like how long of an animation we want to have. In this case, we're going to do fly to for over like 3 seconds or 3,000 milliseconds. And then lastly, we have the actual fly to itself. So when we access that viewport state that we declared at the top, again, now it's in scope because it's created outside of the construction of the object. We can tell it we want it to fly to this point that we've determined here. And without further ado, let's refresh the emulator and you'll be able to see in action. So you can see down in the bottom here we have the button that says recenter the map. Let me get rid of that guy. So if say for instance we zoom in and we're looking at our points, still clicking on those, we're like, oh hey, look at these, and then we go off for some reason, now we'll be able to hit the recentering of the map and it will smoothly move us back to our original starting point. Um, Again, you can have this for a bunch of different reasons. If you were doing like a search app, for example, you could do fly tos for every time you click on a searched object or things along those lines. So fly tos are just really nice to help you reorient your viewport. We also have ease to, which is slightly different. Fly to goes up in the air and then flies to whatever point you want. Well, ease to more translates across screen. So we have a couple of different like animation options there. But all right, so now that that's all set, you can see here that our view of the map matches what we showcased in the beginning of this presentation. So now you should be able to have all of this functionality for you to utilize. And so now that you've done this, I'm just going to cover some potential next steps that you can do moving on in the future if you wanted to like build off of this app or do different things. Um, so like I mentioned before, you could add things like UI panels. Right now, like we said before, we have the toast elements, which is nice for debugging, but if you were doing a full app, you'd want to do more complex things. So you can do things like bottom modal sheets. It's a nice, clean way to have information pull up, and you could store a bunch of different values like not only the name, but maybe you could do the business phone number. You could do a link to the menu. You could have like the top three favorite drinks of the coffee shop. And it'll allow you to add more information and do it in a neat, professional way. Next, if you wanted, you could do your own custom style. So right now, like I mentioned before, we're just using standard, which helps you template a style and kind of handles a lot of the things for you. But if, say, for instance, you really needed really specific branding for whatever company that you're working for, you can go in using Mapbox Studio and make your own custom style that matches whatever your branding needs are. And then lastly, you can do other things like adding SDKs like search or navigation. So right now this app is kind of basic because it's, you just have your points that you click on and you can move around the map, but I have to go in and manually set all these points. If you wanted to, say, for instance, do a search of all of Providence and every coffee shop that Providence has to offer, you could add our search SDK and then make points appear on screen accordingly. So it's a super helpful option that we have. And then, say, for instance, you wanted to create this app where, okay, not only do I want you to search for these coffee shops, but I also want you to help my user navigate to them. You could then supplement that with our navigation app, our navigation SDK, so you can go in and show them the actual routes that they need to go through. But yeah, so here also too is a link of all the supplemental guides that I used, as well as the play guides throughout this presentation. So feel free to take a screenshot of this if you want to go back and access these file or access these web pages yourself. I've also included at the end Android markers from GeoJSON because this also has some additional code from some of the last section that I did that wasn't in like the install guide. But yeah, so that's pretty much it for me. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thanks to Greg for emceeing, as well as Chris and Andrew for helping me with this presentation. And a huge shout out to Pung for helping with some of the code. He's one of our Android engineers. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
Incredible. Gustavo said amazing presentation. I think that really does reflect what we just saw there. It's always a bit of a challenge and risk to go live with a demo and show code. And so honestly, I think you nailed it. Um,
Thank you.
we did get one question from Raj. Raj, I responded to you in the actual Q&A. I don't actually have an answer for you right now. We do need to check probably with Pung, who Emily just referenced, to get you an answer. So I've documented your answer and then that you asked, and we can follow up with you for sure. You did also ask, so Emily,
Mhm.
I'll pass this to you. We also have Chris in the chat if need be. So Mapbox Compose library doesn't work with ProGuard. Opened an issue. An issue was open for this. Is there any plan to add required rules to Compose dependency? Do we know?
Ooh, that's a great question. I'm not 100% sure, but we can go back and check for that. That might be a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but we can definitely find out.
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Raj. You are asking good questions. We just have to check with one of our SDK developers. Andrew in the chat did say that I know our 16 KB support and notes about 16 KB support have rolled out and been updated across the docs. So you might be able to do a search, Raj, in our documentation site to get an answer to your first question. Okay, those were the questions that we had. So I am gonna give people just like another minute. If you do have questions, type them into the Q&A. And while we wait to see if there is any more, I do want to just say, like I said at the beginning of the session, there are 60 sessions for build, and we're not even halfway over yet, which feels wild to say because there's already been so many, but we are not halfway over yet. So if you go to the build lobby or the build Zoom console, you will be able to see what's coming up for the remainder of the day, and then also what's coming up in the next 2 days. I do know that Emily, for example, has a similar presentation tomorrow at this exact time. That's not covering Android, but covering iOS. So if that's something you're also interested in or need to do for your job, you should definitely attend that session and find out similar information, but for iOS. Okay, so I haven't seen any more questions come in. We really appreciate everyone who attended. Emily, you killed it. That was awesome. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
And we'll see everyone else on other sessions.